Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditative practice that engages mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week, we'll look at Mosaic, the collection of somewhat random things, bringing them together into an overall kind of cohesive map. The important part of that, not only the shapes of the individual objects, but the gaps that emerge between them, how we control it, guide it, evenness or dispersion. There are many elements in our tool set that we can deploy to begin to organize space, organize the mind, organize the presence of the body through its breath, through its attention to detail and application, and through the release into a creative space as we explore a little bit of tone and shading, a little bit of edge, training in some form of mindfulness. Not that we are always present and perfectly there with everything around us, but that from time to time we can take that breath, choose to engage broader, to notice the senses, to feel what is taking place around us, maybe to bring a little bit of that inside of us, internalize it, and use it as inspiration. I didn't notice until partway through the drawing of this exercise that the inspiration came from an activity, a friend's birthday party, doing some crafts and playing around on the weekend, that my partner had done a little mosaic out of tiles, and it must have trickled in, the filtering out from things we observe, influencing my mind's eye, ideas of organization, and an interest in drawing. Some inspiration out on the page, expressing it through this act of mindful drawing. I'm going to start with a pen and then probably move to a pencil to do a bit of shading. So whatever you'd like to work with, maybe have a couple instruments around for the crisp, precise stroke and the more open, softening of spaces. Go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. I think I'm going to use a pen to start with, and maybe have a pencil around, do some shading or tone elements to it, but anything should work. A nice, simple kind of dividing page pattern exercise that I think we'll go through today. Drawing some loosely interlocking shapes. You might think of it like a mosaic or a stone kind of patchwork, and we'll think of it at different scales and see where it leads us. So for the intro warm-up period, finding a shape that works for you, or kind of a general idea of shapes that work for you. You might play across a little bit of scrap. You think of a mosaic, right? It could just have kind of random cracked little pieces of something, and they gently start to fit together. They may have funny jagged shapes, or they could have more distinct shapes cut intentionally with the tile, depending on how that starts. And so something might begin rather loose and arbitrary with lots of flexibility, or could work towards something more regular, pentagon, hexagon, these shapes that kind of nest and have relationships, share sizes. That's something you can explore, even change and play with around the exercise, looking at scale, fit, edge, and that little gap between them. We'll work with a bit of a wider gap, something in there that we can draw into the space a little bit as we go. But overall, this will get us started filling out and populating our page. The size can vary. We'll try to fill towards the edges, but you could collect a small group, whatever you want to kind of develop and play around with in your drawing. After that, we'll see where it goes, drawing into and around the shapes to think of it in different contexts. Before we begin the larger exercise, just giving our hands a little time to be warmed up and present, to bring our mind's attention to all the instruments of our outer digits, to open them wide and stretch. Start to get those white marks where the skin is pulling lighter, letting us see the tension, and then relax them. Maybe set them down or just let them float a little bit. And stretching, opening, and relax. As that's moving, we can do a couple with our breath. When you're ready, you're breathing in to stretch and open. And exhaling, so let them float into a relaxed state. Give them a little wiggle, turn them side to side, rotate it around. A lot of blood flow to the fingertips, a lot of attention flowing out into those hands as we begin our drawing. And finding that place on the paper where the hand feels ready to begin. Taking a breath to establish and draw that first piece of the mosaic. A closed shape, occupying some territory on the page. And building out from there, shapes gathered from the mind. A collection sitting somewhere nearby that you can pull small pieces from to explore their interconnection relationship here. Some fitting into the space between, others creating their own new, larger spaces. And we can use this drawing out of controlled shapes as a place for stabilization, for synchronization between ourselves and the page and the expression of these figures. A breath in to establish, and when you're ready, on the peak of that inhalation, placing the pen or pencil and exhaling as you begin to form the next shape on the page. And I'll follow this rhythm for a little while. In to establish a slow, calm exhalation to track that pen or pencil around. Breathing in to have time for the eyes to absorb, and exhaling as the hand follows their guidance, engaging with the empty space there. That space between action. A chance to locate the next engagement, to let the mind take in the growing collection or composition. A chance to come into presence with your moment of interaction with the page. Let the eyes and mind make a few decisions. Breathing in, finding a place, this one small, this one regular, this one strange, close or far from neighbors, sharp or rounded. That little moment of collection, it lets us see a little more of the possibilities forming around the page. As we bring our attention from the space between the space of inhalation to that second part of the cycle, the space of exhalation, we can observe the pen or pencil's motion. First, noting clockwise or counterclockwise. Noting the angle from vertical to horizontal of holding the instrument. Breathing in to establish and exhaling to observe our action. And as you may approach the edges in that observation, you can also make a decision of where to draw, to stop. Does it crowd towards the edge of the paper like a frame, or continue on out? The page infinite, the window we have, just a moment. And with that exhalation and attention, can you bring a little consistency to the act of drawing? You notice counterclockwise. You notice speed. And in that noticing, follow it with a little bit of presence and attention to that movement. A few more shapes on the exhalation, really tracking it out. Knowing your direction. Knowing your speed of interaction with the breath. Growing the relationships between shapes. And finding a place where the mosaic begins to define itself. We can move from the establishing, though feel free at any time to add more shapes. Perhaps the eye calls to an empty space. We just bring that into conclusion, things we notice as our attention is more present here in the creation of the drawing. We're going to move into that space between, if this was tile and a grout, that would be where we'd fill it in to give contrast or texture. Or perhaps we can find some other things in there, begin tracing paths, really as outlines around shapes. Those can go all the way around, maybe even extend out to the spaces unfilled. Path offset like a curb from an edge, the rounding of a piece of material, a bevel, a way of moving beyond the shapes. The path may also enter into that central territory, work around and with the shapes or cross between them as we wander the gaps here on the paper, creating new local conditions. The drawing through what we've made a new convergence of our seeing, of our hand moving in concert with the eyes, of interpreting edges, shapes, and volumes. A chance to explore in whatever way you find interesting in the drawing, taking the space established for a few minutes to travel around and through, over and in between. See if we can mark out some layers of territory. To see what it might open up for the drawing. So follow your breath, follow the paths you've established here in the first half, and draw for a few minutes. As you continue to work in that space between shapes, finding pathways, choosing collisions or overlaps, navigating your way through the open space between, what you begin to notice about your decisions, about places of density, the mapping of precision along an edge may bring a little discomfort depending on positions, the strangeness and constant reorientation of the shapes, providing new challenges of what we can see comfortably with the eyes, to track the pen or pencil. When any of those moments come up, we notice. Perhaps we can say, interesting. An edge or the line, the new trajectory, will end up being what it is, sometimes perhaps pinching and converging, or slipping away as it struggles to find the connection through the occlusion. It was all just part of the action, letting them take shape and give uniqueness to the drawing, breathing through any discomfort, letting go perhaps a little bit of the desire of precision. Perhaps when a path dead ends into a previous choice, we have to let it be the end. But as many layers of tracing start to form, new groupings, new places to look into happen on the page, If you have a pencil, something softer nearby, a marker, you could use that now or continue to develop with the edge of a pen and begin to shade some of the spaces between, emphasize that movement through a territory, a loose mosaic grid. The softness of bringing another medium into play, change our interaction and feeling with the page. Can we bring presence of the breath-body connection into that, working at an even pace, not one of shape and line, but of movement along edges, filtering out, filling void. Breathing in and exhaling at an even pace, noticing it in our attention, staying present with the natural rhythm of our inhalation and exhalation, keeping it in our mind so it doesn't bunch up or get too caught up in the new sense of motion, the hand. The shading here doesn't have to represent anything, just another way of moving the hand while we watch the breath, guided in and out, softly expanding and contracting the rib cage, replenishing our muscles, our blood flow with oxygen. The background of the automatic system, circulation of air, the circulation here of pencil through the voids, the circulation of energy riding to our muscles, replenishing the action in a constant refreshing cycle, in and out, supporting that continuous flow of a medium, graphite, ink, charcoal, whatever it may be, through the hand, through the action, onto the fibers of the paper, the gradual, even depositing noticing things coming together, a rhythm perhaps to the hand, to the wrist, finding a way that you can move the pen or pencil for you just to engage with the changing shapes and directions, maybe a consistent orientation with little circles, cycles moving through, bouncing, adapting. The tip of our pencil, a little Roomba navigating the hallways. And this could begin to be seen as a grid, a park, a city, and just the color contrast of some grout, and a little mosaic of tiles. And perhaps after the exercise, coming through at any time when you have some time to return to this breathing into texture, tone, some colored pencil, some markers, and building further out that idea of the patches linked across edges, territories, roads, and see what it can develop into. But in the few more minutes we have here, riding those waves of the breath, keeping attention on the consistency and ease of the speed of the hand as it moves adaptively between the thin and the thick, between the left to right, the up to down, the strange diagonals. As the hand, arm, fingers, all flexible joints reorient themselves to the location and to the action, even, not slow, not fast, present with the breath at a cycle of calm relaxation. As noticing, observing all of these interactions, the physical elements of the act of drawing, the internal state, the breath, and the mind's attention, and let our senses guide us back into our space. As you breathe in on the next few inhalations, noticing any subtle smells in the atmosphere around. Maybe the heat, the sun on the windows, something coming through an open screen. Noticing your feet on the floor or the chair, the subtle pressures far away from our attention of the hand. Noticing your posture. How is the back sitting, moving, resting, engaging? And as you see fit, as the mind reaches out, reconnects to parts that have fallen to the background, bringing action to an end if you feel ready, or continuing to draw, whatever works for you as we approach the end of the guided part of the exercise. All those pieces, from the tips of the fingers to the tips of the toes, from the full expansion of the ribs to the relaxed compression of everything collapsing. Notice being back present in your space, coming out of practice and moving to the next part of your day together. Working on this drawing makes me realize that it might be fun to do a few longer form, maybe part exercises, bring it together on the same drawing. So that'll come up in the next few weeks. If a longer form exercise, something that'd be interesting to you to develop a more cohesive drawing, to bring in more techniques, consider subscribing to the channel. There's new episodes usually every Wednesday morning, and I appreciate if you share them with your friends. Give it a thumbs up below if you enjoy the exercise. Leave some comments about what you discover or things you might like to explore in an act of mindful drawing. I hope the exercise brings you a little bit of relaxation, opens you up to a little bit of creativity and inspires you to keep working there on that drawing for a little while if you have the time, or coming back to it later as a foundational stabilizing place just to reinforce that mindfulness and attention and presence that you can have with your own expression. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Enjoy the space you've made for yourself and draw well. Thank you.